Welcome into an episode of The Stinger, a trade deadline special on the All Hornets podcast network. One podcast feed with multiple shows, making sure we cover the Charlotte Hornets from every angle. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, go onto YouTube, leave a 5-star review. The All Hornets podcast network is affiliated with the Fans First Sports podcast group. Today's show, we're joined by Andrew Claudio of Knicks Film School to hold some mock Knicks Hornets trade discussions. So, interesting episode today. This is going to be the first of a series of trade specials we're doing ahead of the deadline. So, hopefully, you're going to enjoy the show. Andrew, say hello, introduce the people, tell them about yourself.
Hello, as James mentioned, my name is Andrew Claudio. I'm executive producer over at Knicks Film School, also our pregame show host, and yeah, they're your number one place for all things Knicks. Thank you for having me.
No, not at all. And the reason I wanted to do one of these about the Knicks is because, firstly, we've already seen them make a move, right? With OG Anunoby moving off quickly and RJ Barrett. I mean, early returns, just to get people's thought. What were your thoughts when the move was made, and what are your early returns so far?
So when the trade was made, it was a very emotional day, I'll say, because there's an emotional connection to Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, two guys that were drafted by the Knicks, developed by the Knicks, played key roles in a very fun turnaround for this franchise over the last 3.5 seasons. I mean, 4.5 if you include RJ's rookie year, but that was not really that good of a season. And you know, when you have a homegrown player like that and you've experienced some success with them, seeing them go out is not always the easiest. RJ had gotten to a point in his performance that it almost made it that you needed to give him a change of scenery. So there wasn't, at least on my part, as much of a sting to losing him. Quickly was the big one because a lot of Knicks fans, myself included, always thought there was more there than the role that the Knicks were giving him. And you're seeing that in Toronto so far.
Yeah.
I think where I'm concerned is that if you were going to trade Emmanuel Quickley, getting OG Anunoby back is probably the trade to do it. And being able to get Anunoby back for a guy that in Quickley that you potentially weren't even going to be able to re-sign in restricted free agency, depending on what deal he was offered. And then in a guy that you were only playing 20 minutes a game, whether you should have been playing him 20 minutes is a different conversation. But being able to get Anunoby back and not having to give up a pick is just it's something I can't really fault the Knicks for or completely object to. And you've seen it so far in the first 5 games. The Knicks are 5-0. They lead the league in defense. They're just blowing teams out right now. And we'll see if that success continues.
And the Knicks still have all their picks for that big fish, which we know they are patiently waiting for, meanwhile upgrading the surrounding cast. So, no, I thought the trade made sense for both teams when it happened. And what I thought was interesting is after the trade was made, you know, in a classic 2-for-1, right? That is what you traded 2 players for 1 there. That naturally creates holes on the Knicks roster. And there was reporting post-trade that the Knicks are maybe not done on the trade market ahead of the deadline.
Well, I'll say this real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but they did get Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn back. But as you're saying, the headliners of the deal being that but the roster spots, they actually, it was like a 2-for-3 as a result. However, it's been marketed as a 2-for-1, which is why I agree with you that I don't think they're done either.
Yeah. So when you look at the Knicks roster for now, if you know a lot of these listeners to this is going to be Hornets fans and then hopefully some Knicks fans too. What would you say are the priorities on the roster, kind of upgrading heading into the deadline? What are the team looking up for?
So this is where I'm trying not to overreact too much to the start of the Anunoby era with the Knicks. They won a good game against the Timberwolves, who lead the West and have been just an impossible team to really score points against this season. And they won that game, the first game of the Anunoby era. And then the next 4 games, they've just they had a tough first half against the Bulls, but then they blew them out in the second. They controlled from minute 1 this game against the Sixers, in which they won by 36 points. And then they took care of the Wizards and the Blazers by 20 plus, and with the Blazers almost 40. So I'm trying to assess what their needs are without overreacting to, like, we don't need anything. We're 5-0. We're never going to lose again. The backup point guard position has been one that is has been talked about amongst Knicks circles that they're going to need to upgrade. Deuce McBride, who has taken over and been given an opportunity in these first 5 games, got off to a rocky start, but the last 3 games has really shown that there may be something there to him in a rotation. I don't know if he can run the offense, but as a 12 to 17 minute player, he's been awesome. And so maybe you don't need to give up too many assets to go get a guy to be your backup point guard if he can be fine in that role. The backup center position, Precious Achiuwa has been not a long-term solution yet to be the backup center. The Knicks obviously lost Mitchell Robinson to injury in December. However, Isaiah Hartenstein has filled in almost not even just amicably, but has almost made it that he's now the starting center as far as the franchise is concerned. And the way he's performed has really unlocked this offense in a way that you really wonder if he's just the starting center going forward,
Really?
even when Mitchell Robinson potentially comes
Yeah.
back. So there's a need at center. There's a need at potentially a backup point guard, but specifically another playmaker or primary ball handler. So that way it's not just all falling on Randall and Jalen Brunson on the offensive side of the ball.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, from the Hornets' point of view, as you can imagine, this season is a lost one, mainly due to injuries and some underperformance. It's a combination of the two, and obviously a strange situation. New ownership group in place, front office in place that probably aren't long past this end of this season. So it's a little bit strange. I think the names to watch from the Hornets' point of view on the trade market are Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, Terry Rozier, probably a bit of a controversial name, but one that I think should be considered. Even someone like Miles Bridges probably shouldn't be ruled out as well. So I think those are some of the common names that you can see. I mean, the core is basically LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams. I'd say there is a high price on Terry Rozier. I would say Gordon Hayward needs to be traded. And I would say kind of Miles Bridges and PJ Washington are to be had for the right price. And the rest of the roster is a lot of young guys who, again, will have no value probably to anyone else in the league apart from the Hornets themselves because they're developmental pieces. Apart from maybe Nick Richards, who is a backup center, who is a guy who could have some interest. But I'd say that's the current position. I guess, I said to you when I messaged you, the key people I'm probably interested in from a Charlotte Hornets perspective, what this team really needs moving forward is toughness, veteran leadership, and outside shooting, and plus defenders. Like this team has been soft, weak, out-rebounded, pushed around, not been able to stretch the floor on a consistent basis for too long. And I don't think there is any likelihood of major kind of putting multiple picks to go for someone big at this trade deadline for the Hornets, not with the current front office, but trying to bring in some of the right culture settings, some of the personalities approach the game the right way. That's what I think the team will be looking to add if possible. And that's why I had Josh Hart, Quentin Grimes on the kind of first list. I mean, both of those players, they are now, obviously, I think Josh Hart was starting at times this year. He's kind of fluctuated a little bit in his Knicks tenure, but generally coming off the bench. Where would you say those two are in kind of the pecking order against each other? And I've seen Josh Hart, there's been some disappointment with him this season from Knicks fans. Yeah, just where would you sum up where kind of the Knicks are with both those two players?
So it's interesting you bring up these two. The Quentin Grimes of it all, year 3 player, was in the starting 5, got inserted into the starting 5 for Evan Fournier last year, and it was that point in which you really look at the Knicks numbers and saw the uptick in improvement. This year, new year, and the starting 5 was doing fine, but he got off to a bit of a rough start. Wasn't really able to find his role in the beginning, and almost requested a move to the bench because he thought there might be more of an opportunity. The Knicks also just were flat out better when Dante DiVincenzo shared the floor with Jalen Brunson, and he's shot like over 45% since moving into the starting 5.
Very good.
So Grimes has almost settled into a bench role, a backup role, but the Knicks had a glut when they had all these wings with RJ and Quickly here, that upon this trade happening, both Grimes and McBride were told you're going to be given an opportunity now with there being no longer a need for a consolidation trade. And he's the game against the Sixers. He played over Julius Randle in the fourth quarter and was able to be part of the team that really closed that game out in the fourth. I wouldn't be surprised if he's available, is what I'll say. From things that we've heard,
He had the quote, didn't he? Like it's hard to
this is
play
when he
when you only get
was
one
when he
shot.
was in the starting five. He
Yeah,
said he felt the pressure of like every time I
that was
get the
right.
ball, I feel I have to make it or I'm gonna get pulled immediately. And he spoke to an anxiety that like his teammates weren't finding him, and when they were, he's like, I have to make this or else I'm getting pulled. And this comes with the fact that you have a better option and DiVincenzo behind you, and a better option and Emmanuel Quickly behind you, and you better make your shots or else you're looking at 17, 16 minutes tonight. Now, him being extension eligible this summer, I imagine he would not be extending with the Knicks this summer based off of the number he might want. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if he's available. I don't know if
What sort of
necessarily
number do you think he would want? Like judging, what were Knicks talking about maybe over the course of the season? What sort of range would fans be expecting?
for money.
Yeah, for Quentin Grimes for an extension if he's extension eligible.
So I that's the thing. I'm not even sure like that
Okay.
conversation has come up yet. I know he being a guy that could shoot 40 from 3 and guard your primary point of attack, which he did really well last season, is a guy that, that's not OG Anunoby money, but that's the OG Anunoby skill set. And it's very much the opportunity hasn't been there. I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if he was available, so that way
Okay.
he can enter into that bracket. So that's
Very
the Grimes of it all, that he may be looking just for a change of scenery. The Knicks locker room can be a little cliquey too, in that there's like a Villanova clique and a CAA clique and a Kentucky clique, and he's none of those things. So he may be on the outside looking in at a certain standpoint. So Josh Hart, I actually push back on the fact that he's been a disappointment and the fact that he's been a starter, because he's only started, I believe, 4 games, and it was when RJ Barrett was out. Either 4 or 5 games, and it was when RJ Barrett was out. He has been the de facto 6th or 7th starter on this team, and for 2 years since the Knicks traded for him last year, has just been a consistent on-off machine. I know what his impact metrics say, and I think it's because he's just not hitting the 3-point shot like he did when he came to the Knicks last year. He's also not as good at the rim, I believe, than what he has been in the past. The thing that I think he gives the Knicks, and this was like a thing when Quickly was here, is an injection of pace that they just don't have when they have their normal starting 5, or didn't have when they had their normal starting 5. And like adding someone like Anunoby, he can do so many things. He's no longer responsible for being the primary like point of attack lockdown Bruce Bowen defender, and he could do some other things off ball that, like, when he gets it, it's almost like you're starting a fast break no matter where he is on the floor, whether it be off a turnover, whether it be off a rebound. He's the injection of pace, and it's why they flat out for 2 years, or at least since they made the trade last year, been better with him on than with him off. And that's no matter what lineup pairing that you're with. Ironically, the only lineup that you can make the argument he was worse with is when he was with RJ Barrett, which Knicks fans got very frustrated when they would play together. So point being, I'd actually, if we could, I did see when you mentioned it that Josh Hart would be like a guy you'd be interested in.
Yeah.
Because he's a Villanova guy and a CAA guy. I think he's
in both camps.
I think he's the second untouchable on the Knicks, to be honest, behind Jalen Brunson. Like, if you had a Randall trade, I think that would be more of a not that either are likely, but I think they'd be quicker to trade Randall than they would, Jalen Brunson's best friend.
I mean, and that's why, this is why we have to get the insight of people like you who follow this closely, right? So that is great insight. And look, it's good we rule it out early. There's no point focusing on that. And the insight on Quentin Grimes is great as well. So that's really interesting. That helps me know where I'm going to focus my time. In terms of on the Hornets roster, I'll hand it over to you. I would say, obviously, there is probably not as much talent on this roster, but are there any names that kind of stuck out as interesting to you? I know you talked about center position, back a point guard. I would probably say that to some extent, both of those positions are actually weaknesses on this Charlotte Hornets roster itself. But yeah, are there any names that you kind of wanting to get the same kind of insight from the Charlotte Hornets point aside?
So their insight, I think, is the key word because I have some questions. But the first trade I thought of was just the Knicks just got Precious Achiuwa. You had mentioned Nick Richards is available, like that. I believe that works as far as the money is concerned. And if I'm not even sure what team would have to give up the pick in that spot, maybe the Knicks because they're trying.
Yeah, it might be no team. It might just be like we like that player for that player. Like
so, if it ends up being just like the Knicks actually have a need and the Hornets would not be, maybe it's like a top 50 protected second round pick, and it's one of those things where maybe Nick Richards fills a need for the Knicks. That's the one that I initially thought of. What's the Hornet perspective and vantage point of Terry Rozier at the moment? You said that I know he's averaging 24 a game, which is kind of wild. I know there's
almost 7-8 assists and I think
right, like he's
turnovers. Yeah,
he seems very valuable, and I have no idea. Like I know if the Knicks, I don't think Rozier's the guy that the Knicks would do this for, but I believe Grimes and then Fournier's expiring for Rozier works. I'm not even proposing that, but like, what is the price of a Terry Rozier at the moment?
Good questions. So Nick Richards, let's start there. I think he would be a Tibbs guy because he's a Steve Clifford guy, and Clifford and Tibbs view basketball in a very similar way and are very close and speak still now. Steve Clifford loves his physicality, he buys into his role. He's like, you can describe him in some of the same ways like a Taj Gibson, like strong, buys into his role. But I would say Nick Richards not a vocal guy, and very limited. So like offensive rebounds, dunks, putbacks, but can actually move pretty well for his size. I would probably have him above Precious Achiuwa in a value element, just because I think he's proven to be an every night backup center over the last couple of years, and he's been a fine spot start. If you look at his numbers, not good. He's a backup. That is what he is. But he brings more size and probably fits a Tibbs style more than Achiuwa, who's maybe more of like a switching center. That's more what Precious was known for in college. So I think this is one where if the Hornets, now the other thing with Richards, he's contracted for next season as well. Achiuwa is a free agent in the summer, so there's an element of risk there that you carry, right? And I think the Hornets want to get bigger and stronger, and trading Richards for Achiuwa would do the opposite of that, but it would make you more switchable. So it's a little bit of a philosophy thing. I don't think it would only happen if, for whatever reason, the people in the talent position thought that Achiuwa's style and upside was much greater than Richards, which I think that's close enough that you wouldn't assume that would be the case. The Rozier one is interesting. He's having a fantastic year, playing more on the ball this year because of LaMelo Ball's injuries, but he has also actually had some of his best moments in Charlotte before the season was playing off the ball. He is just an incredible shot maker. He is the best work ethic on the team. He is all those things where coaches praise about his leadership, his approach, his work rate, all those things, which feels very much like someone who would get on with Tibbs. And he's also someone that the coaches continually praise his defense. He's asked to basically guard the first choice perimeter offensive guy on the other side. He's then asked to be the Hornets' go-to scorer and their main distributor. Like, he is doing a lot right now, and he's actually doing it remarkably well and remarkably efficiently. He should be struggling with efficiency this year, and he's not. So there is no doubt he is playing extremely well. My issue for the Knicks, I think, with Terry Rozier is you couldn't play him and Brunson. It would just be too small in the backcourt. And then you wouldn't be willing to pay, if you're just playing, well, we're paying for the minutes that Brunson's off the floor. Well, you're talking about 14, 15 minutes a night, and you're not just giving up the assets that it would cost to get a good backup ball handler. So that's where I think the disconnect is. If Rozier was 6'5", right, and could play next to Jalen Brunson and handle the ball a bit so he could play point while Brunson was out the game and play next to him, I think he would carry more value. I just don't see him being able to do that in New York.
I think what you're describing is the Immanuel Quickley issue
you're right.
that the Knicks had, and it's what the fan base got very frustrated with towards the end, at least, when Tibbs just wasn't comfortable playing quickly next to Brunson at long stretches because of how small of a backcourt that was. I mean, the loud outcry from Knicks fans was like, according to the lineup data, it works fine no matter what they're playing against. The quickly Brunson backcourt was always like a ridiculously high positive when they were playing together. And this is where the Josh Hart of it all actually came into effect. The Knicks had this lineup with quickly Brunson, Randall, and Josh Hart. Anytime those four shared the floor together, it was like plus 25 by the time that the trade was made. So if you weren't willing to play that lineup consistently and, quickly being a small guard, and that was the issue, to then not extend quickly and trade him, to then also then trade for another 6'1" point guard that you're not going to play, that's making $23 million a year, I think is where Knicks fans would be upset by a deal like that. And it's also where I'd be surprised if the Knicks did make a deal like that. So I really think where we fall is the Nick Richards seems to be the trade, if there is a trade to be made between these two teams. I also just like from talking to some people in the know over there, like the Knicks, I'm not sure, looking to add that high a salary onto their books. They do want something controllable because, as you mentioned, there's a big fish coming down the road that they may potentially want to go and make an all-in trade for. But they're not gonna look for an expiring contract. So I didn't even bring up Gordon Hayward or anything like that. Like I think they would be interested in adding a guy that's got years on his deal. I don't know if 20 plus a year is the amount of salary they'd be looking to get back.
So this is interesting. So I think we understand the issue with Rozier. I had a couple of trades go down here, and I'll share both with you, and you let me know which one you want to start with. You think is more interesting?
Please do.
One was PJ Washington, which you've not talked about needing a stretch for, but that is what PJ is. Can play center, plays about a third to a quarter of his minutes at center this season. So again, if that Precious is not working for you, that PJ is another option. For Evan Fournier, which is essentially salary filler, and Grimes, and I understand there might need to be, picks involved in that one way or the other. It'd be good to get your thoughts. But if for example, if the Knicks felt we need to get another forward, a guy who can play in the front court, who can stretch the floor, and because we feel that we're overbearing on the wings right now, that would be one idea. Or the other one was Evan Fournier plus Grimes for a Gordon Hayward. Now, that was more of a rental. That's a very short-term goal. And plus, actually, the money doesn't quite work for that. You'd need to find like an extra. You'd have to make another tiny deal on the side. And this is the challenge. But for me, from if I'm Knicks perspective, I'm renting Gordon Hayward, who probably might help this Knicks team offensively, especially that second unit, maybe more than Grimes. But it's a very short-term move. And what happens after that? Evan Fournier at the minute is kind of a vehicle, really, for the Knicks, I think, for a potential trade. And I just don't know if they'd want to use that vehicle on Gordon Hayward. But maybe PJ Washington, who signed for multiple per years, having a down shooting year, but again, he's proven he is a better shooter than he is this year, would probably be the only other person who would make sense.
So I'll start with the Gordon Hayward of it all. The Knicks were the other team that was trying to get Gordon Hayward a couple of years ago when he signed in Charlotte. So I know Tibbs would love Gordon Hayward. I think,
and he can handle the ball as well. He can play some point guard. He's done that for Charlotte's second unit at times. Obviously, a non-traditional form, but he is a ball handler, creator for others.
So, this is correct. Apologies about my ignorance here. How much has he started every game for Charlotte this year?
Well, started everyone he was healthy for. He is essentially he is currently out with a left calf strain, which is he's due back probably in around a week's time, I would guess. But there has not been any ankle injury, any major injury thus far. He missed 2 games with a stomach virus because there was a virus going around the team. But he currently has a left calf strain, but had started every game up to, I think it was around December. He was playing pretty much every game.
So you're hinting at both points that would make this a non-starter for me. And that's actually, no pun intended, non-starter. He wouldn't be a starter on this team. He would be coming off the bench. I don't know if you want to give up assets like Grimes and Fournier for someone that's not going to start for you, especially someone at that type of salary. Even if the Knicks were just looking to dump Evan Fournier for someone that might contribute to their rotation, it is a 1%.
That's the angle I was coming at it from. Is
right. I get it.
Turn Evan Fournier into someone who can contribute for this year.
Yeah, I think because you still have Fournier has a 1+1 and it's a team option, so you can still it'll suck for Evan, but the fact that you can still pick up his team option and then trade him this summer makes it less of an urgent need to trade him at this deadline. And the same thing goes with Grimes, because he is technically under contract for next year on his rookie deal, that you can just ride it out and give up less assets for someone that'll help your backup unit. So the Gordon Hayward of it all probably isn't the direction they'd go.
Makes sense.
I don't think they'd trade Grimes for PJ Washington either, to be honest. I think Josh Hart's been a fine backup four. There's just not a lot of backup fours that you're afraid of in the league that Josh Hart can't defend and can't be. Like you said, the Precious Achiuwa of it all is why I think the Knicks would look for more rim protection at center and potentially a backup five. We'll see what happens in Chicago, but like Andre Drummond continues to be the guy that Knicks fans are hoping becomes available, because then he brings you the offensive rebounding that you lost Mitchell Robinson. He brings you the exact type of backup five that they're kind of looking for, exactly what he was in Philly. And he's been a rebound machine since taking over the starting role for Vucevic in Chicago. So, I think that's the direction they go, and it wouldn't cost you as much because they have a couple of trade exceptions that they can use to just put him right into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's more the direction they'd go than something like PJ Washington.
Yeah. The only other thing the Hornets could do with that move was you do PJ Washington and Richards for Grimes and Fournier. So you get a backup four and you
both,
get your backup five. It's a 2 rotation players for 1. Now, again, from a Hornets perspective, I think that's the element for me where you're getting a lot smaller. If you think about, going from your backup 4, your backup center to Grimes, and what do you do going forward? I think that's where the value skews too much, maybe making away from the Hornets. And I don't think that's where they would look to. So it seems like, even though obviously Quentin Grimes might potentially be available, the Hornets don't necessarily have the players you feel would be able to make a deal get done.
Well, so do you think that Richards and Washington are part of the long-term solution? Because that's my thought on the Hornets, is that it shouldn't matter what the temporary things are. Like if you can get Grimes and you think he can be someone that plays next to LaMelo one day, then like you got him, and then you worry about finding other pieces like a backup 4 or a backup 5 in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I said at the start, the only things nailed down for this team are Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, and Mark Williams. Like everything, this team is too bad to have anything else locked in. So no, I'm not saying they're by any means locked in but I just think in terms of the value that those players have together, Washington and Richards, I mean, maybe it is more close, but it's if Quentin Grimes was like a 15-minute backup off the bench and it never quite regained the form he got last year, that would be 2 very solid backup players playing at bigger positions, which generally, like, the bigger positions can be harder to find, to fill. You're giving up a 2-for-1 for rotation players.
Right.
It gets a little bit dicey just in terms of the value for me. Now, the fact that there's hesitation on both sides, maybe that means like that's where it's actually a discussion, right? And both sides could talk themselves into it.
I don't know if I can talk myself into it. I don't think you would either at the end of the day. I think the fact that it is a discussion makes it for why this is, closer than we realize. I do think they would look for something, just respectfully, like something more than a backup 4 and a backup 5 if they were trying to trade Grimes and Fournier for someone else.
Address your needs, right? And
I think that's why Rozier, I think, was a more fascinating conversation of, if the Knicks were willing to take on that type of money, Grimes and Fournier, I could see it. Especially since I do think Grimes is available. I just flat out do think he is available going forward. I don't know if this would be the potential trade for him to be available to go, but I do think he can be had for the right price.
Well, everything I know about Rozier is they would be holding out for like value of multiple first round picks.
Right.
Not multiple like 3-4, but like 2 first round picks, or a first round pick and a player. And I just don't think Quentin Grimes is enough for that reason. But no, I think it makes a lot of sense. That's why we have these discussions. If there was a third team, I still think Quentin Grimes, like you say, a 3-point shooter who can be a point of attack defender, that ticks a lot of boxes for Charlotte. And we've not spoken much about draft picks, either of us, in this, because I think from the Knicks' perspective, they're holding them for that all-star who comes up.
Bingo.
And from a Charlotte Hornets perspective, they're not in a position with a lame duck front office that they're going to be giving up future draft picks right now. It's just not the right time. It's about retooling the roster rather than trading away draft picks at this point in time. So I think that's why neither of us have really brought that up.
Yeah, I could see a world where the Knicks trade. They own Dallas's pick. It's top 10 protected this year. They could trade that in a deal if they felt it was the right value and they were getting something for more than this year. I don't necessarily know because that's what they did last year. Is they went the opposite and they traded their own first top and they protected it top 14 for Josh Hart because they thought, well, the Dallas pick is going to convey, so we have a pick this year. And then Dallas found themselves in the play-in, and they were like, what? We'll just skip out on the play-in and tank completely. And so the Knicks had no pick in the draft this year. So with being in the same position, I think they'd rather trade the Dallas pick if it's more confirmed that it's going to convey this year rather than trade their own, which, as you mentioned, there may be some bigger fish on the market this offseason that they'll want as many assets as possible they could potentially move for another player.
Well, Andrew, I think, look, we didn't find a trade, but that's fine. It was still a really good exercise to learn a little bit more about those two players who are kind of guys who I think Hornets fans have had their eyes on. So I really appreciate you giving up your time. Best of luck to the Knicks. We will be watching on. Wishing them luck for the rest of the year. And appreciate your time today.
Of course. And look, if Nick Richards for Achua or like a Jericho Sims is in play, I'm not going to say no, but that may not be the most, it may not be the sexiest trade, but like Nick Richards is the thought that I think a lot of Knicks fans would have. It's like a backup center. That's like what we're looking for right now, a backup center.
If we can find a way to put to bend Grimes into that deal, which there won't be.
I was going to say not in that type of deal, but I do understand like the Hornets are looking to just acquire pieces that could be part of the solution. Yeah. So I get it.
Well, just to finish up, everybody, thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by allhornets.com, a credentialed Charlotte Hornets outlet powered by Sports Illustrated. Allhornets.com's aim is to bring you 360-degree coverage of all things Charlotte Hornets. So thank you very much for allhornets.com for supporting the podcast. Thank you for Andrew, Knicks Film School, for coming on the pod. And look, if there is ever a Knicks Hornets trade in the future, you'll have to hop on again here.
Deal. Sounds good, my man. Thank you for having me.
Right. Thank you.